and record it. And all right.
Same channel?
Yeah, same channels. All right, we're back online. I have to reset my computer. I don't know. Maybe I am being hacked. Maybe making fun of Nicholas Passion has put me on a target. Maybe he hacked my computers. I don't know. I have no idea at this point. Anyway.
Yeah, so, I've heard that, Little Nicky has, insiders at Google, and you may be on a blacklist with them now.
Oh, man.
He's got a lot of pull there.
Damn it, Jesse.
He's got a lot of pull there.
There's Keemstar, there's PewDiePie, and then there's Nicholas Passion.
Church of Failure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Keemstar, PewDiePie, Church of Failure. See, no, okay. Church of Failure, and then Nicholas Passion. There you go. That's it. It makes sense now, right?
Don't put him... You don't want to put him in the same category as Nicholas.
He's the puppet master.
Ew.
No, what I'm saying is he's the puppet master. He's behind the scenes. He's controlling everything. Okay. So, Church of Failure. You wanted to talk about horror comics, like 1950s horror comics and Comic Code Authority, and how that relates. Because I understand that back in the day, horror comics were pretty. I mean, they had freedom to do whatever, right?
They did, but even like you and I talked about, they were much tamer. I mean,
yeah.
If you look at some of the stuff that I sent over, and I mean, even the stuff that was deemed just entirely too racy for the time, by today's standard, is milquetoast.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true.
But I mean, basically, what happened is you had the introduction of comics in the late 30s with Superman. Well, comics had been around a lot longer, but Superman was really the turning point for comic books. Because the war comics kind of faded out and all that good stuff, and you had superheroes, and then you started getting more war comics back into World War II and westerns and love stories. Like, believe it or not, there used to be comic books for girls that were just love stories and high school drama stories.
Oh, you mean Archie?
Them. Yeah, like Archie.
Oh, even like Archie, but even more like toned down. Like, it was all completely from a girl's perspective and all of that stuff. Like, there was stuff called love letters and, all like high school crushing and all that stuff.
Oh, I totally know. I used to have a collection of them.
I bet you did.
If you did, you'd have some money, sir.
I know, right? Damn it.
But anyway, in comes the 50s, and in the 50s, they started looking at comics because a company called EC, which ironically stood for Educational Comics, was founded, and they started putting out stuff like Bible story comics and school comics with science and history and math and all of that stuff. It was lame, but it was wholesome. Yeah.
Time out. Someone actually buys a math comic? What the fuck is a math comic?
It's in 1950, and it was about solving like word problems via comic book.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Solve this problem and win the girl.
Well, train A and train B and all that stuff, they would draw it out.
Ah, gotcha.
And you'd get the word problem in a panel. But moving on. The owner of that company died and left the company to his son. Well, his son was a chemist and really didn't know anything about what his father was doing or care for Bible comics or educational comics. He wanted to make something that would sell because the company was in debt.
Yeah.
So he started putting out crime comics. Now, there were already crime and horror comics on the market, but they were maybe 30 of the 1,000 books that were coming out at the time or whatever. It was a very small percentage. But when EC Comic came around, they started putting out just that many and more. And that's where you get stuff like Tales from the Crypt. That's where you get stuff like true crime comics. Tales from the Crypt. The Crypt Keeper was a comic character in the 50s.
Yeah.
What about Dick Tracy?
Dick Tracy was 60s and 70s, I believe.
Okay.
But those crime comics were a lot more fantasized, and they didn't break the Comic Code Authority, which didn't show law enforcement in any compromising position or breaking the law or doing anything illegal or killing anyone or firing a gun or any of these things.
Yeah.
Basically, all the things cops do.
Oh, so fantasy about cops.
Right. You had to imagine that they were the good guys. But seriously, I love our law enforcement.
Oh, yeah,
Trademark
yeah,
Make
yeah,
Alaska.
yeah. You gonna start singing? You gonna start singing about it too in auto tune? Because I can't
I don't have my auto tune box. If you could hook me up with a filter, then maybe.
With my internet
But
connection
anyway.
right now, it might just happen automatically. I don't know. We'll find out.
Hey, there we go. But you start getting all kind of horror comics and crime comics, and a psychologist named Frederick Wortham comes into the scene and starts basically analyzing children and asking them questions about what gives them nightmares and the stuff that they read. And basically, Boys Being Boys opens up a nationwide Senate-sponsored investigation, like the U.S. government got involved in censoring comic books. Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
there were burnings.
The government got
Go
involved
ahead.
in censoring some people. What? It's like what? That's crazy.
Yeah, the government, right? This is completely unheard of. So, right. So fast forward a little bit, and before anything major happens that invokes the Comic Code Authority, you have people going from town to town, collecting comics and committing mass burnings. And this is a little tidbit most people won't tell you for comic collectors out there. If your comics did not come from the era in which these burnings took place, they're probably not worth what you think they are.
Yeah.
So you probably got like
you
a
know,
reprint. Yeah. Okay.
Right. This is an era where you could send your comics back if you didn't sell them and get money for them. So the scheme was another little tidbit of history, and I'll get back on topic. I'm sorry. But all of you ever seen a modern comic?
Yeah.
Like from the 90s and up?
Mm-hmm. I used to look at X-Men. I'd read a few, but honestly, I wasn't a collector, but I'd dabble in it.
Okay, well, back in those days, if you bought a comic from a comic book shop, it didn't have a barcode on it. It had, in the place of the barcode, usually like a Captain America shield or a little Spider-Man head or something like that, just as a placeholder. And that's because of the direct market. And this is where we get back on topic. The direct market in the 1950s would send you comics without you paying for them, right?
Okay.
And you'd pay 10 cents. You'd pay 10 cents for your comic book, and the store owner would take 5 cents and send that back at the end of the month for every copy he sold, and he'd send every copy he didn't sell back as well.
That seems like a perfect. That seems pretty good. But I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
No risk for the store.
Yeah.
Right. Well, fast forward a few years and people start gaming that system where you would buy your comic book, and then once you read it, you'd take it back to that store owner for like 2 pennies and buy another comic book. Okay. So he made money off of it twice, essentially. And then got to send it back.
Wow.
But you also had... sorry,
No.
had a couple of
It's
shots.
made me think of another industry where this happens, but no, it's okay. Keep going. This is good. This is good.
Yeah, well, at this point, you've got hundreds of thousands of comic books hitting the shelves every month. And I mean, it is a major market money-making business. I mean, in 1950 and 1948, all of these like old school Depression level times, the comic industry was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year off dime comic books. That's how huge the industry was back in the day. People look at it now and it's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody reads comic books anymore.
No, not really. I mean, the people who are selling them seem to be the comicsgate guys or whatever. But man, I don't.
Well, and even there, like that's the future for comic books, I'm afraid, and that's scary because it just leads to. I remember Gamergate. Gamergate was a shit show. Anything with gate attached to it becomes a shit show. Everybody wants a gate. But here we are.
Deadman Gate.
That's right. Deadman Gate, the ass crack ritual.
That's probably gonna happen. Oh shit.
It is.
Anyway, you've got these mass burnings taking place. You've got people freaking out all over the country. You've got local governments pulling certain books from the shelves.
Mm-hmm.
And for the time, I mean, you remember what horror used to be. Like, scary B-roll horror movies used to actually scare people.
Yeah, you had some freaky shit in there.
And yeah, but I mean, it doesn't scare us today because we're accustomed to jump scares and great special effects, and you know, we're accustomed to a different kind of horror. Seeing a scary monster in a comic book isn't going to make any of our kids fall asleep and have a bad dream.
Right.
You know, they watch scarier shit than that on their animated movies.
Yeah,
but
and even the content, because you gave me you gave me a ton of comics to look over. And I was expecting, because you told me that, man, this stuff, because you had the horror comics and the crime comics, and then the CCA wanted to come in and censor it. But it's like, I was expecting.
Well, it wasn't the CCA. The CCA was formed after the Senate trial.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that too.
So
the government wanted to censor it. The U.S. government wanted to censor comics because they're too edgy. Too much, but yet the comics they're looking at are nothing like the comics today. See, I've been showing the horror covers of then. Let me show you a horror cover of now. This is some Japanese manga, I think. And Jesus Christ,
what?
I mean, it's not bad. It's
Can someone shoot me the link again, by the way?
Some tits.
Link to
this is a team. I'm sorry. You got the link?
The link to.
Okay. But yeah, the one on the screen right now is pretty tame. That's especially tame for today's standards, and it's but too breasty for then, you know. But,
yeah. There was a certain point where you couldn't have the little line to depict cleavage.
Mm-hmm.
That's sad. That's a sad day. Okay. So what happened then? So let's talk about the trial.
All right. Well, basically what happened is you had the publishers, the major publishers, National Comics, EC Comics. National Comics would later become what we know as DC Comics, taking the initials from the well-known Detective Comics, the origin of Batman. These publishers were all called in to, speak before Congress and let everybody know what was going on. And Congress and Wortham and several parents and committee members and everyone said their piece. And I even sent you a few video links. Like, there were a few hit pieces put out on comic books in those times. Mm-hmm. Like we talk about hit pieces coming out today on YouTube creators. They were doing this shit back in the 50s to industries.
Wow.
They came out and they had obviously paid actor children depict violence on another small child because all of these other kids read crime comics and they thought it was okay.
Wait, so you're saying they organized a false flag operation? They created fake operations?
Basically on national television. They put a hit piece out on the comics industry. And eventually
who they?
Yeah, who's they?
Who put them out?
The federal government and the people working, child psychologists and things of that nature. Okay. I mean, local governments, anybody that made a piece, but it eventually made it up to the Congress and Senate. And eventually the publishers came together and they wrote their own little code and presented it to Congress and said, this is what we're going to do from here on out. Is this acceptable? And it said no monsters, no law enforcement doing what they've been doing, like taking bribes or being violent or committing crimes or falling victim to the criminal. The bad guys couldn't win anymore. And this affected horror comics the most, though, because you couldn't have, decapitated heads. You couldn't have people. You couldn't have blood. There was no blood. No blood allowed. You could not have any kind of sexuality. You could not have any kind of suggestive themes. I mean, it was 100% a nerfing of the comic medium at the time, but it did lead to the rise of superhero comics because this is what led us into what they call the Silver Age. But we can stop there and discuss that if you want.
Yeah, do.
Yeah, let's go into that.
So, discuss.
So
the
superhero was in response to basically a ban on horror.
The superhero was a response to the Comic Code Authority because they had to create the Silver Age, I think, actually, not the superhero, because you had Green Lantern. He was just a magical-based detective. You had Batman, but he killed criminals and carried a gun. You had Superman, and he was still Superman. You had Wonder Woman, but she was into bondage. And the Silver Age led to less magic and more science fiction, more superheroes, and more, technology-based powers. Iron Man, Green Lantern, The Flash. Batman becomes a detective and takes a vow to never kill when they retell his origin story, and then he becomes a really campy character on television.
But then he has a sex perversion with Robin, right? Because
Adam West.
Adam West, yeah.
And I'm looking over the 1954 code criteria. Man, it's a lot of stuff, and it looks crime shall never be presented which
as a positive thing.
Yeah, if crime is depicted, it should be as a sordid and unpleasant activity. Like, oh man, I have to rob this bank. I really don't want to rob this bank. But man,
yeah, and they tried to do that sometimes. Like they always showed the criminal showing remorse, but it was like a last ditch thing that he had to do to feed his family or something. It was a noble, wayward act.
You can't even use the words horror or terror in the title.
Becky, I can't hear you if you're talking.
No,
that's me.
Okay.
Jesse's gone underwater again.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I was saying you can't even say horror or terror in its title. That's crazy.
No, not at all. But the death of terror comics led to the complete demise of EC comics, like in its entirety. Like it basically, its doors closed overnight. They tried releasing other books, but it was just money down the drain. Because they had to start competing with Barry Allen's Flash, that was an exciting new character, and his first couple of issues, those are $100,000 million comics.
Wow.
It's fascinating to me because I'm still stuck on something here, and I get why the government would be wanting to censor, but everyone was like the people at the top, or the people that could have resisted under the principle of free speech, went along with it, and people just went with it.
It was more of a morality thing, because they literally published, like, you remember the name of the book that I sent the link to, Seduction of the Innocent. That was what their argument was, that these comic books are seducing our youth to do violent things, and they're conditioning them to be more, violent and commit crime.
Which is like, okay, even if you make
without any evidence.
Yeah, without any evidence whatsoever.
Well, their supposed evidence was psychologist testimony. That's what Dr. Frederick Wortham was.
Yeah,
he was a child psychologist.
But where did he get his evidence?
From interviewing children about comic books. He would ask them loaded questions like, do you have nightmares? Yeah. Well, when do you have nightmares? Well, I have nightmares sometimes. And Do you have nightmares after you read scary comics? Well, yeah. Well, how often do you
duh.
read scary comics? Well, most of the time. Do you have nightmares most of the time? Not all the time, but sometimes. And he would just frame his argument that they had nightmares because of comics. Or if they were juvenile delinquents, he'd say, well, why'd you steal that? I don't know. Well, did you read about something like that in a comic book once? Yeah. Do you think it was okay because you read it? I guess so. And there's your evidence.
Oh my God, getting it from kids.
There was no regulation on that kind of shit back then, man.
Yeah, but people still try to do that now. Video games. They try to associate violent behavior, shooting schools and shit with video games. Oh my God, and they even have the stupid bullshit studies, the psych studies, to try to link. Oh, they play video games, and then they're more attuned to aggressive words, or they do a little shock on someone, but that doesn't prove anything. At what?
Correlation is not causation.
That's actually sorry, Becky.
Oh no! This isn't me. This is just
That's okay.
Okay.
It's just
actually,
okay. I'm not saying I'm listening.
You're the only one lighting up on screen.
Oh, it's okay. I don't know what that is.
She's
being good for
it's
once.
her personality.
Okay. Anyway, no, that's actually a great segue because you mentioned the video game industry, but you also got to keep in mind the movie industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, before I get into that real quick, one thing I did forget to mention that I didn't really make a note of, but I did remember, EC Comics didn't completely go away. Are you guys familiar with something called Mad Magazine?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Love.
Well, they
Mad
did that.
Magazine.
They did that because the Comics Code didn't censor magazines.
Nice.
So what the hell's the difference?
Well, you didn't have kids buying magazines because of the higher price. A magazine was closer to 25 or 50 cents. You get 2 or 3 comic books for that.
Yeah. Look at that.
Kids wouldn't buy magazines, and you could put an age limit.
What's the difference between a comic and a magazine?
Well, you can put an age limit on a magazine as well.
Mm.
That's how they sold pornography at a newsstand. They sold kids comics at. You could say Mad Magazine is intended for 14 and up, and they wouldn't sell it to a kid if he didn't look 14.
Yeah, I'll be selling magazines then. Fuck it. Terror magazine.
They would make horror magazines, but they didn't sell as well.
Yeah.
And they just went into making Mad Magazine, and that's where they stayed afloat in the in the industry.
Yeah.
But
I loved Mad Magazine as a kid.
Yeah.
That was the best stuff, man.
You can thank the death of horror comics for Mad Magazine. They never would have invested in it if they didn't have just lost their main moneymaker.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess
correlation and causation did equal there.
Well, reaction. Yeah. Oh man, it's amazing to me because if people just stood up and said, you know what? No, we're not doing that. We're just doing our own thing. Who's going to stop them? The government can't technically stop you because First Amendment, right? What are they going to do?
But newsstands couldn't carry your books if they didn't have the seal.
Because of what? Because of who? Who said they can't?
The Publishers Union.
Who the fuck is the Publishers
The gatekeepers of comics.
Who the fuck are the... See, I keep on going the ladder. I want to keep on going up the ladder and be like, what the fuck is your problem, man?
Like, you remember that group of people that came together to form the Comic Code Authority? Those people. They came together and they said, if you don't have this stamp, we're not going to let you publish your comic. And most companies couldn't publish themselves. They could make the comics. They couldn't publish them. It's like these indie creators now. They have to go to publishers. That's why they have to have so much to make one comic happen.
But there were people...
Because of distribution, right? Distribution is the choke point.
Well, no, they're doing their own distribution as well. But the thing is they don't own printing presses. They don't own, factory cutters and staplers. They have to get these books printed somehow. And that's what publishing houses did.
Mm. Okay, so was everyone on board on this? I mean, there had to have been some comic creators later on.
EC definitely was not.
Yeah, they were finding a way around it. What about anyone else? Were there any other players that were like, fuck this, man, we're doing our own thing?
I think a lot of people fail to look at and this is just my boomer talking, but I think a lot of people fail to look at the fact that in that time, in the 50s, and even the early 60s, even with free love, the nuclear family was still very much whole, and politics were nowhere near as corrupt as they are today. I mean, they were still corrupted because power breeds corruption, but we've had 70 years to, beat that out of them.
Yeah, I mean, they sound
Now
pretty
they're
corrupt.
just worse.
I'm sorry, they sound pretty
But
corrupt when they're able to do hit pieces on comics. I'm sorry.
Back then, it wasn't about politics for companies. It was about making money. So if somebody came to you and said, oh, well, the government doesn't want you to do this anymore, but you can do this, this, and this if you still want to make money, and they say, all right. You're going to put people out of work. You're going to put families on the street. Nobody wanted to do that back then because jobs mattered and people mattered. Now there's just too fucking many of us.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to think of like the comic creators. Like, so there's this new authority.
You
have to
comic creators that wanted to draw horrors. Sorry.
No.
There's this new authority.
Yeah, there's a new authority, but you want to create your thing, but you can't. Mm-hmm. So then superheroes become a thing, or at least become more of a thing because that's what you have to do. But there had to have been some sort of rebel that was like, you know what? I want to do my own thing. Like I want to give a big middle finger to the Comic Code Authority because I have my vision.
Yeah.
Okay, who are those people?
EC Comics. They put out plenty of horror magazines and crime magazine anthologies that were completely legal.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And how did they get away with that? Oh, because they were magazines.
They were magazines.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Now, what about Stan Lee with this shit? I mean, because didn't he?
Stanley came in after Vietnam.
Yeah.
Or World War II. Was it World War II or Vietnam?
Yeah. It would have. Well, he's old enough. It would have been World War II.
He and Dr. Seuss fought together.
Oh.
No way.
Yeah.
Did they
really? Were both in the propaganda department of the U.S. Army. Yeah.
Huh.
Actual factual. I believe you can look that up. My dad told me. He could have been bullshitting, but I believe that's true.
You gotta fact check that. Huh.
Right?
Fact check
it. Yeah.
Okay, so around this time...
I don't want to...
I'm just around this time, was the CCA still in effect? I mean, was it loosening? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a new time. I mean, Vietnam was going on. You had free love. You had, and we started to enter, not out of the silver age of comics, but we started to kind of transition towards what people call the bronze age of comics, which started in the mid 70s.
World War II.
Yeah. No. Oh, yeah, it was World War II, but did they fight together?
Mm-hmm. Served in the same army unit.
Nice. Yeah, they were in the art department.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I believe Jack Kirby was there with them at one point, but I could be wrong on that one.
Hitler and Tolkien were at the same battle in World War I, but on opposite sides.
Good. That means Tolkien was right. Mein Kampf was wrong. So the Shire exists and Nazis don't. Take that.
my oldest brother had Christmas dinner at Tolkien's house.
Oh, damn.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, can I ask a racy question?
Sure. Let's shoot.
Is Nazi denial as bad as Holocaust denial? Can you deny the cause of the tragedy without denying the tragedy?
I mean,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Can you deny who denies Nazis?
Well, I just said that Tolkien was on the right side of the battle and Hitler was on the wrong side, so I'm going to deny Mein Kampf, which is denying Hitler, which is denying Nazis.
There you go.
But Mein Kampf exists.
Not in my world anymore.
No.
The Shire does, though.
Get you there.
Okay.
Pay attention, SK.
I'm just trying to keep up. It's not easy.
All right.
Okay.
We're gonna have to draw. We're gonna have to draw him a map.
Just get the what's his name? The Pepe Sylvia chart in here. We'll be good.
Okay. So when he starts with Stanley, what I'm reading right here, updating the code, what Stanley was commissioned by the United States Department of Health and Education and Welfare to do a series, to do stories on drug abuse, right?
Right. And what happened was he put the comic out, and the Comics Code Authority said, no, you can't put this out. It depicts drug use. And obviously that's a no-no. And he said, all right. And he went back to Marvel, and he said, fuck them, put it out anyway.
See, that's what I'm looking for.
That's why Stan Lee was just so pragmatic. I mean, I don't believe a single negative word ever said about that man. I never will.
Mm.
He believed in something from the day he was born, and he did it until the day he died.
Of course.
And he was involved in comic books until the day he died.
Man, and I like that too, that he went against the Comic Code Authority. Then again, he had the backing of the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. I mean, they wanted him to do it. He was commissioned.
He didn't need it. He had the backing of Marvel. And Marvel was Marvel was the only thing keeping comics alive at that point.
Mm.
I mean, comic sales had fallen because they were just beginning to be seen as just a kid's medium again.
Yeah, well,
and your older readers stopped reading when you cut out all the stuff that they wanted to read.
That's true. When you make it all PC, when you make it all safe, who wants to read all that? Who wants to read safe?
Right.
Stuff?
Well, you don't mind your kids reading it because there are good moral lessons in there, and they're actually still training themselves to read. And comic books, I don't know if you've ever noticed, have never been dumbed down. The language in comic books challenges you to learn new words. It is an excellent tool to teach children how to learn if you can actually interest them in something that you find appropriate. As long as you take a look at it first and make sure it's not drivel written by an idiot for a quick buck. There are some comic books out there, and they're old comic books for days. Anything written in the 80s. I mean, you pull out something from the 80s, and they use more complex words than they use in college classes.
Now, did to the best of your knowledge, did Stan Lee receive any sort of backlash going against the CCA?
He got a slap on the wrist. They said, that wasn't right. You shouldn't have done that. We understand, blah, 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 blah. Don't do it again. And he did it a few more times, and the CCA basically became irrelevant. At a certain point, I believe in the 80s or 90s, Marvel Comics dropped it all together. Mm. And it had just become so irrelevant because they now had a, age. They replaced it with a more user-friendly, age-appropriate rating system that allowed them to sell to an older audience.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it wasn't actually a law. The Comic Code Authority was not based on a law. It was basically an agreement.
Well, yeah.
And everyone that had made that agreement in the beginning was dead when they finally dissolved it.
And that was part of my reaction to this. It still is. It's like first of all, when I'm hearing this stuff, I'm like, I hope history doesn't repeat itself. Like, the reason why this happened was because these content creators, the publishers, let these busybodies that are in their ear have power by doing what they said.
Well,
it kind of reminds me of just any guild rules, like the Bar Association, the AMA. Pick a guild. They set up their own internal rules for membership and ethics and all kinds of things. And if you want to be part of the guild, you have to obey the rules.
Well, that's actually kind of goes back to what we were touching on earlier before we just went off the rails all over the place again, like I love to do. Movies and video games also did the same thing. I mean, they introduced their own rating systems to avoid government censorship.
Right.
There are rules. You can't put a not rated or a rated X movie in a public theater, but you can put a mature movie in a public theater and leave it to your audience and theater's discretion. Same thing with a video game. You can buy your kid Grand Theft Auto 5 if you're a terrible parent like me, but you have to sit down with them and say this isn't real. But most kids get that.
Yeah.
Besides which, just go to the school library and see the shit that's on the shelves in the library to check out and read that are worse than, let's say more graphic than any comic book.
You mean like Chuck Palahniuk books?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading like the Thin Red Line in 7th grade,
When I was in 9th, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that stuff's just sitting on the shelf.
Yeah. But what are you going to do? If you start censoring knowledge, if you start censoring information and storytelling, you're going to destroy the youth, man. Like, you're going to destroy the kids of that generation.
I'm saying what I'm saying is that it's a futile effort and pointless. It's not even. I don't think it's worth doing. I don't agree with it at all. And I'm saying that if you can mute one channel, but there's 1,000 channels.
Can I politely disagree with you on that and kind of step into the next part of the discussion that we were going to go into?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what comicsgate is trying to combat at this point, because I've personally been a part of 3 industries so far that have been infiltrated by what people passionately refer to as social justice warriors.
Oh, those fuckers.
Yeah.
I played a card game from the time that I was a teenager when the game was brand new, and
Magic?
Called Magic the Gathering.
Magic. Yeah. I knew you were talking about that one. I was like, what?
And Magic the Gathering went from a card game that had very, very well refined art that was a little edgy, but it wasn't anything terrible that you didn't see in a D&D character book already.
It was cool to look at.
It was
great art.
Yeah. And then come, I don't know, the early mid-2000s, you started to notice that everything got a little tamer and a little tamer, and the quality started getting a little lax and a little more lax. And then features started going away, and promos and formats, and the game just slowly started to turn into something that everyone that had played it for 20 years didn't recognize. Mm-hmm. And then it happened with board games, and now it's happening with comic books.
Oh, but we're just trying to tap into a younger audience.
So, I think you misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
I think you misunderstood what I meant. And what I said that there's all these different channels. What I meant is, it's you can, even if, never mind. It's a not a good point.
Well, the
thing is you were saying it's a good point, and it's great, but as Dick Masterson would say, it's a very blue-pilled outlook. It's a very hopeful outlook. When you sit back and you look at it, if nobody stood up to the social justice warriors in these companies, and they got in and infiltrated and got their buddies hired and got themselves into upper management and started hiring people like them and basically took over the companies like they have, then there's not going to be another Magic the Gathering, because that format's dead. Card games are dead. If Magic the Gathering ever goes away in full, you'll have people that still play it. You'll have people that still play Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, but card games are fucking dead. You're not going to make a new one.
They're going to shove progressive politics into everything until it drives to the ground. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, that's what they're going to do, and they're doing it with the biggest fish in the market.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing that with comics too. That's comicsgate
with
like
Marvel more, but DC as well, because Ethan Van Sciver was a DC artist before he basically stepped away because of internal microaggressions and internal hatred for him at DC Comics.
And he's doing well, right? I mean, he's doing great.
He is, but I will offer a slight criticism is that he does spend a lot of time bantering back and forth on Twitter, and
yeah, well, I think it's part of his.
You know,
right?
he's running late on his delivery for Cyberfrog, and I feel like that should be the main focus if he wants to keep comicsgate as a movement that doesn't become Gamergate like. Because if you start missing deliveries and people start signing up for Indiegogos and just never deliver, and in the end people look at it and they say, well, I tried to stand up for comics and comics took my money and run. Not that I ever think that Ethan Van Sciver will do that, but if he doesn't set the precedence for you have to deliver at least as close to on time as you possibly can, which he very well could be doing. But he spends a lot of time bantering with people on Twitter.
Doesn't he show updates? Doesn't he show updates on his live streams and stuff on what he's doing with
He does.
Okay.
He does. He keeps people well informed, and that's a very good thing to do. But it's gonna start getting to a point where that's gonna be a major talking point of his aggressors, and they're gonna start turning a lot of people's opinions because of that. Because it's a legitimate question to ask, why are you spending your time on Twitter as opposed to finishing the book that I paid for and was promised however many weeks ago?
You're too busy streaming on YouTube. Where's my frog comic, huh? What's going on with that?
And right, and it does take a certain level of patience from the person doing it, but you can't set that precedent and keep that standard. That's just what happened in Gamergate, because eventually you had people starting GoFundMes for wheelchairs and medication and new computers that had nothing to do with gaming whatsoever, but they were using the Gamergate hashtag to get rich.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that. People were trying to cash in on it. Even people on the other side. Even the people on the anti side were cashing in with bogus game projects and never saw the light of day. It's like, come on, man. You guys are a bunch of con artists. Just move on.
Well, and to the credit of Ethan Van Sciver, I mean, you gotta know about the Captain Marvel movie that's coming out soon, right? Brie Larson.
Oh yeah.
Well, there have been several GoFundMes set up with the same kind of ticket sales idea that they're sending so many underprivileged girls to see Captain Marvel.
Oh my God.
And they're doing it with GoFundMe money.
Okay.
1 second, I need to get something to drink. But instead of Brie Larson just paying the tab, you know.
Well, Brie Larson can't sacrifice her money. I mean,
no, but did you?
She needs her millions, man. You can't expect Brie Larson to donate to charity. I'm just saying.
Did you see her Twitter post about this movie being her form of activism?
Why can't movies just be movies, man? Just act in the fucking movie. Why does everything have to be like an activist thing? Like, what are you doing? Like,
well, my favorite thought was, I love that you finally stand up and become an activist when they pay you several $1 million to do it.
Yeah, that's the other thing about actors and actresses.
That was probably in the contract.
Yeah, it probably is in the contract, man. Like, that's one thing I never understood about, like, listening to an actor talk about, virtue signaling about something. It's like, motherfucker, you get paid to read lines and act. Am I supposed to believe you're being genuine right now? Like, I don't believe you. I don't believe anything you're saying.
Right. I believe your PR agent thinks it sounds really good.
Yeah. And I even, when I say this, I mean that even when they go on TV and they start talking about, like, people that are victims of a tragedy. I'm like, those kids in Honduras or whatever, in Haiti, they don't know who the fuck you are. I mean, they might know who you are, but you don't care about them. Not really. No. You're getting a check. You're getting a check to say the stuff you say.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
This isn't even a charity, big dog.
No.
That's the thing. It's not even a charity. They're trying to collect money on GoFundMe to send girls who couldn't otherwise afford it across the country to go see Captain Marvel.
Can't afford
and they're doing GoFundMes for it. This ticket sale.
Why do they have to go across the country?
No, it's not all. They're going across the country. They're doing it in places
Oh.
across the country.
Mm.
They have several GoFundMe set up, ranging from 16 to 20 to $5 to $10,000, all that shit.
One thing I noticed, and I'm going to say this from my line of work. I work with a lot of families. A lot of families do tend to be, I guess, below the poverty line. They usually get food stamps and government assistance to where if they're working like any sort of job, they might have some money for like rent and maybe something for a movie ticket, or they might have a way to get it bootlegged. So one or the other, they're watching that fucking movie they really want to, but I mean they'll take it. They'll take the free pass that you give them it. I mean that's fine.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would too.
Why wouldn't
pay my ticket? I would take it, but it's like you don't need to do that. But
if you're not trying to virtue signal and basically be a sexist against men, why wouldn't you donate to a charity with that money or pay for it out of your own goddamn pocket?
Yeah. What is a movie ticket going to do to improve a poor kid's life?
They get to stare at Brie Larson for 3 hours, Goy.
Well, but the boys want to do that mostly.
That's right, and we have to stop them. That's sexist. They can't objectify a woman. We have to put girls in those seats so boys can't get them.
We can't objectify a woman. Might as well just cut my eyes out now. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, because he likes this great big old jiggly butt.
Right.
Hey Becky, can I tell a sexist joke and you not get mad at me?
Shit, yeah.
Awesome. Hey, you know this gender debate that everyone's having, right? How many genders are there? 2, 15, 75. You know, everybody's gotten it wrong so far. You know how many genders there are?
99.
There's one gender. And that's male, and that's because women are property.
Oh.
I heard that one on the kill stream the other night. Figured I should share that.
Well, that might have been back in the day, back in the good days. You know, that's the times they mean when they say "Make America Great Again." That's what they're talking about. They're talking about those days. No,
that's right.
I'm just fucking around.
But see, we flipped the roles by now. Now y'all are property.
That's
right. Actually, we're paychecks. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Oh my God.
My house.
Shit. Oh man, that's how my wife sees me. I kind of think that.
But in any event, that's pretty much the gist of the Comics Code Authority. Like it was a flash in the pan, and it was the first time that comics realized that they couldn't do whatever the hell they wanted when they wanted. People were watching, and it honestly, I think it led to a great era of comic books, because a lot of people will tell you that the Silver Age of comic books is the best age of comic books to read. From the early 60s to maybe the early to mid 80s, depending on what you're reading, some of the best storytelling that was ever written in the mythos of comic books ever.
You know, that it kind of brings to mind, it's kind of a long way around, but when I've been in writing groups and on writing retreats, and we often do these brief exercises where you're giving a time constraint and a certain conditions, like a start line or some certain elements that you have to incorporate, and you have to just pound something out in like 5-10 minutes, right?
Right.
Under
like a speed sketch.
Right. And or a scene or something. And it seems counterintuitive that putting constraints on yourself actually opens up your creativity. But it really does.
It does. It makes you think on the fly when you get to a part where you get what most people call writer's block. It makes you think outside of your comfort zone, because you have to come up with something that you can actually accomplish in that amount of time. So you have to go to something that you know you can do, but you have to do it in a way you're not comfortable doing it.
And that's what came to mind when you said that, having the constraints of this code actually led to some of the best writing.
Well, it's not that there wasn't good writing before that. I'm just saying that some of the character, and I'm a superhero guy, so I mean I'm obviously biased. This is not a scholarly opinion, but this is a personal opinion in the sense that, hey, some of these things that they put out are just fantastic to read, but when you got into the Silver Age of comic books, they got into a lot more of what we see now as arcs. Like, you still had your one-shot comic books, the entire thing was in that book. But you started to have weaving lines crossing over, so if you got consecutive issues, you'd notice things starting to make sense over a grand scale. And that's what led to some of the initial crossovers. I don't know how long you guys normally run. I don't want to hold you just rambling all night.
I usually do like an hour and a half. Well, we had a technical issue in the beginning though, but it's okay. What else you got? What else you got, man?
Oh man, 80-something years of knowledge. We're not going to be here that long, I promise.
No.
Oh shit.
No, I'm not that old. I just know that much about comics.
Yeah, it's just that I hadn't, before you brought it up, I hadn't considered the idea of these codes for comic books and films as producing potentially more creative products than might have happened without it.
Well, it doesn't necessarily, it's a double-edged sword, I'd say. It doesn't necessarily produce more creative in the sense that some people would see creative, because obviously you're not just going to get a 40-page comic book of a woman barely moving while completely nude, like some of the modern art pieces that you see that people are like, oh God, that's so provoking. No, that's just a naked bitch moving in slow-mo.
Yeah.
You know, I see that every Wednesday night. That ain't art, that's porn.
Shit.
But no, you have situations where sometimes that creativity muddies the water of what we consider good storytelling. Sometimes that free-for-all mentality kind of, I don't know, gets you too far away from what an audience actually wants.
Mm-hmm.
You're always trying to stay one step ahead and be that hipster artist that somebody sees and they're like, this is the most genius thing of our time. You just don't get it. Yeah, I mean, that's your Alan Moore, your Frank Miller, your Mark Z. Danilinski. You ever read House of Leaves?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it yet. I know you recommended it the other night. I went look. I need to order it. I just need to buy a copy and get it.
If I had to put it in a genre, I'd call it horror, but it's not the kind of horror that anyone is ever expecting to see.
I think my cousin was also talking about the book. Like, that's the one where the writing's all weird, right? Like, it's not like a linear narrative. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, it is a linear narrative. It's just not written as a linear narrative.
What?
Yeah.
Get the book.
It's a continuous story that's written from the perspective of several people simultaneously in different timelines.
What? I mean, does he have? Is he?
Let me describe it to you like I describe it to everybody else. It's a book about a manuscript about a movie that was based on a home movie by a photographer that was a Pulitzer Prize winner who never existed. And the writer of the manuscript also never existed.
Man, I'm more confused, but I want to get it. Okay, I'll order it.
Yeah, that's like trying to follow 3-card money.
But
have you ever seen what's that movie about the mathematician that is
A Beautiful Mind?
Yeah. It kind of makes you think of that.
Yeah. I can see that.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, as far as the writing and stuff goes, back onto that train of thought, the writing from the comics in the 60s and the Silver Age all kind of led up to the first mega events of both Marvel and DC Comics, who came out after the Comic Code Authority resolved and was settled a few years afterwards. Timely Comics became Marvel Comics. There was a nod to that in Guardians of the Galaxy, the Timely Company.
Oh, okay. It was them?
And National Comics became DC Comics. So those were your two heavy hitters, and they still are. They have more competition today than they did then. Not really more competition, but better competition.
Okay.
But it all led up to their first mega event where they crossed over characters, and that was kind of something that was done briefly in the golden age of comics, but it was done intentionally and sporadically and over multiple books, and books were created to do it in. You had your team up books, you had more diverse storytelling, and it led to some of the most favorite comics of comic collectors today. I mean, Spider-Man came out of this era, for God's sake.
Yeah.
The Batman that everybody knows came out of this era. The entire Justice League, the Avengers, all of these big names that you see now all came out of the Silver Age of comics.
So what were the crazy crossovers back then? Like what was the most significant crossover?
There were two at the time. It was the Crisis on Infinite Earths, where DC Comics attempted to take all of their storylines that were out there, like how you had one Superman that had gray hair on the side because he was so old, but you had another Superman coming out the same week that was a young man, and then you had Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes featuring Superboy. They tried to bring all of their continuity together in a single Earth, which Marvel had been doing since its inception because of its success.
Yeah.
The creation of a shared universe in comic books was the most radical thing that anybody had done when Marvel did it.
But it seems like common sense, right? Like, just put all your characters in one universe.
Sort of, but it takes finesse, and it takes a lot more planning than they had done before that. The comic creators weren't organized. Are you familiar with cartoonists from back in the day, like how cartoonists used to work in the 40s and 50s?
A little
it was
bit.
all coffee, cocaine, and cigarettes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's what comics were like,
Three
too.
C's.
I mean, they were no different. You were just pumping them out to make as much money as you could. And, I mean, everybody was on speed. Everybody was drunk all the time. Everybody was smoking cigarettes and drinking all kind of coffee to just get the work out. And
yeah, you got to.
In the 60s, when they regulated, they reformatted and they created a system to where DC Comics is usually 6 to 8 weeks out in its publications. So if there's ever a snafu, they've got cushion. Marvel Comics adopted the method of fly by the seat of your pants, but keep a Bible, so to speak, of your shared universe, so that New York doesn't get cluttered with superheroes. We got to keep Captain America from I think he's from the Bronx or Brooklyn. Captain America's from Brooklyn and Peter Parker's from the Bronx. Daredevil and Spider-Man both operate in Queens.
Mm-hmm.
And they cross over occasionally, but they're two different levels of superheroes, so they barely cross paths unless the story calls for it. But it takes hold on.
Oh, you got that's all right. You got the little.
Aww.
Yep. There's a 3-year-old outside.
Oh man, they're just coming in. They're coming in, man.
But,
you gotta close that door. Keep them out.
Well, she'll open it. She's 3, but she's intelligent.
Oh shit! They're learning.
Aww.
They're learning.
Come on, monkeys. Time to go night.
What's that?
But you know, But no. Oh, I
Oh,
know.
I can't interrupt that.
Oh, man.
It's an,
Oh.
oh, okay. It hits the soft spot for me. I have kids too,
Oh no, me too.
little kids.
Oh, I have babies. I love
Oh,
babies.
yeah.
That's great.
Oh,
It's been a
SK's
long time since I've had little ones.
Yeah.
I've never had any. I wanted to sing to her.
Oh God, no.
Can we have her on
Headphones
the
for a
show
reason.
next time?
Yeah.
No,
I don't think I can drink as much if she's on the show.
not supposed to.
None of us would be able to talk. We all be talking to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I don't think anyone would want that on YouTube.
No,
I mean, some
no.
people would. People
No.
that desperately want children, I'm sure.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Oh, look at all these idiots talking to a cute kid. This is weird.
The wrong people. The wrong people will get a grab on that, and it'll be over with. Be like, damn it.
Oh yeah, Ian Miles Chong would be on it in a heartbeat just to take the heat off of himself.
Oh, by the way, I want to start a new show because I don't have enough already.
Right.
Because he's crazier than hell.
But might play around with a thing. There's not this podcast. It doesn't invite a lot of YouTube drama or other drama because it's not really that. This is about guests coming on, talking about what they want to talk about, talking about themselves. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
As long as you don't talk about anybody, they probably will leave you alone. I've found that out. Like, as long as you don't talk shit, you usually don't get hit.
Well, that's my motto. Talk shit. If you talk shit, you're gonna get hit. But I live by that. So
playground rules.
Playground rules. But I do want to play around with a show called Freak Show, where I'll be talking about various freaks, if you will, various people, and see what sort of trouble that gets me into. But like I said, you talk shit, you get hit. I got to make sure my shit is good. But so.
you got a big competitor in Josh from Kiwi Farms there, man. Like, he's pretty much got the lock on that.
He does. We'll see what happens. I might do a Kiwi dozen. Just browse his website. Be like, oh, look at this, look at that. That's what he's doing. Oh, but he owns the website. But anyone can get the information, right? It's an open place.
Man, I gotta advise. Be careful. Stay away from the Kiwis.
Stay away from the Kiwis. What happens with the Kiwis?
It never goes to anything good, man.
Oh, what
happens? It never does.
What happens?
Well, Josh has been deplatformed from everything he's ever done.
I think he goes too hard. And he goes too far.
Well, it's not that he goes too hard. It's just that the people that he goes after, or the people that he talks about, are vindictive as hell, or there are people that just hate him for what he does.
See, that's the thing. Some people get butthurt. See,
yeah.
SK, I like your show. You're talking about serial killers, and they're probably already dead or locked away.
Yeah, what are they gonna do?
They still have fanboys.
But we don't talk shit about them. We just talk facts.
Facts.
That's cool.
And maybe that's what this could be about. Just talk facts about what happened, and you can make your room. See, I think it's about how you handle it. If I make it like I'm just gonna shit on this person left and right, but if I talk facts, maybe. I'll see. I'm gonna play around with it. I've been able to dodge many bullets. So see what I dodge.
I like it. I disavow.
Already.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get Medicare Fembot to clip that for me, just so I'll have it on standby.
Okay. Oh man.
But no.
Well, Church of Failure.
It's been fun.
Yeah, we're coming towards the end here, man. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about comic books, especially horror comic books, and the Comic Code Authority. I really hope that we don't repeat this mistake, because it's like you give them power if you listen to them. First off, like what Dick Masterson said on, I think it was prior episode or whatever. You give them there's a power of just doing nothing. Just don't do anything. When people say, "Hey, you got to go by these rules, these principles, whatever, this code," just be like, "No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm doing me." But
it gets philosophically harder to do that when they start taking your bank account like they did to the Proud Boys leader. When they start taking your channels and taking your PayPal and taking your cards and making it impossible for you to make business transactions and unperson you, essentially, it becomes very difficult to say no anymore because when's the last time you tried to use cash for any kind of major transaction?
I bought eggs.
I use cash a lot still. It's funny because I use cash a lot, and I mean that. Do you pay your rent in cash or your power bill? No, I mean no. That's silly. That's what I mean. Like, what? But would they let you, or would you have to make the trouble to go get a money order? Stuff like that. Yeah, you have to get a money order and stuff like that. But right. I mean, they basically make your life a living hell. You're right. Yeah, you can go get your groceries with cash for now, but there are places in California that don't even take cash. You couldn't go there. You'd have to get a preloaded card. And then if that preloaded card's processor went through Visa or MasterCard, they could just say no. That's so stupid. Like, why just eliminate cash all the way through? Like, cash is great. You can do things with cash that you can't do with cards. Like, just cash is untraceable.
Yeah, cash is untraceable.
And that's
cash and ammunition. Those are the most deadly things you can have in an apocalypse where the government decides they want to take over. Keep cash and bullets. Man. Well, I gotta. By the way, I ate the black pill. I hear it. But okay. Yeah, I was signing off. Thank you so much, Church of Failure. Right. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about this.
Yeah,
ladies,
learned a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Not a problem. I would like to try and invite myself back to talk about current horror comics someday.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Yeah. I think I showed a few of them on the screen. Some of them had a newer art. Anyway, ladies, gentlemen, if you enjoyed this,